Are you sure? After the account closure is processed, Ada West will cease to exist, and the people you know will never be able to find you again, never to be found again. That suited her just fine. Ada let out a bitter laugh, then composed herself and said firmly, I'm certain. The person on the other end was taken aback by the resolve in her tone but quickly responded, very well, West miss, the procedure will be completed in 2 weeks. At that time, we'll provide you with a new identity. We wish you a brand new life in 2 weeks, a brand new life, hopefully. After hanging up the phone, Ada stood up, dragging her numb legs to the roadside, hailed a cab, and went home. She had just finished showering and was about to lie down when Luke Hayes pushed the door open, reeking of alcohol. The moment he entered, he unerringly found Ada, then opened his arms to embrace her, whining like a child. Honey, why didn't you come pick me up? I was waiting for you. You smell so good. As he spoke, his head nuzzled into her neck, and his hands began to grow restless. Ada watched his insatiable expression, her thoughts drifting uncontrollably. She still remembered how, in the beginning, Luke had tirelessly pursued her for 3 whole years just to prove his feelings. Later, when Hayes' mother opposed their relationship, he held her tightly and said, It doesn't matter if my mom doesn't agree to our marriage, I'll never marry anyone else, we'll just stay in love forever, don't worry. I won't marry anyone but you. Later, Hayes' mother, seeing she couldn't act directly, kidnapped Luke and forced him into an arranged marriage with the Park family. When Luke escaped, his face was deathly pale and haggard. Only later did she learn he had been starving himself to resist his mother's control. From then on, no matter how Hayes' mother threatened her, she never backed down. Because she knew someone was fighting alongside her, she began to feel grateful for overhearing these things today. Otherwise, how much longer would she have been deceived by him? Will she find out on the wedding day, or only when she's mistaken for the other woman? Suppressing her heartache, she gently breaks free from his embrace and refuses him. I'm a bit tired today. Luke doesn't force her either. Heartbroken, he helps her onto the bed and then holds her from behind. Then you should rest well. I feel like you've lost weight recently. Ada pretends to be asleep and doesn't answer him. Early the next morning, Ada woke up to see Luke changing clothes in front of the wardrobe. Hearing movement behind him, he turned and walked over, bending down to plant a kiss on her forehead. Good morning, wife, it's New Year's Eve today. I'm taking you out, get up and change your clothes. Without waiting for Ada to refuse, Luke went downstairs. She changed her clothes and went downstairs. The cooking auntie saw her and quickly greeted, Madam is down, let me serve you some porridge. Ada and Luke weren't married, but he always ordered the servants and subordinates to call her Madam, because he said he would only have Ada as his one and only Madam. But now, half a month later, he would have a legitimate wife, and her unofficial title as Madam should come to an end. She lowered her head with a self-deprecating smile and went downstairs to have breakfast. After breakfast, Luke dismissed the driver, saying he wanted to spend some alone time with her, and drove her out himself. During the day, they wandered around the city. Luke took her to a garden restaurant and the aquarium. The whole way, he was extremely attentive to her condition, stopping to rest the moment she showed the slightest sign of fatigue. At night, just when Ada thought they were heading back, Luke drove the car up the mountain. Knowing her confusion, Luke explained, You once said watching fireworks from the mountain must be beautiful. How about we go see for ourselves today? It was just an offhand remark she made while scrolling through videos, so casual she had nearly forgotten it herself. Unexpectedly, he had kept it in mind all along. Ada didn't respond, and he didn't mind. Sensing her slightly low spirits, he kept chattering away, trying to cheer her up. Actually, Luke was a man of few words, but in front of Ada, he talked endlessly as if he could never run out of things to say. They reached the mountaintop in half an hour. And the night view tonight was undeniably beautiful. Just in the last hour of 2024, Luke's phone suddenly vibrated. When he saw who the message was from, he glanced warily at Ada beside him. Seeing her still gazing down the mountain, he subtly let out a sigh of relief, then eagerly unlocked his screen to reply to the message. Ada slightly tilted her head and clearly saw the content on his screen. Luke Gidge, I'm so lonely spending New Year's Eve alone. Can you come keep me company? Flirty. She saw Luke reply with a "Don't be silly. No, Gia is really scared of the dark and needs her brother to stay with her." Luke hesitated for a couple of seconds before replying with an obedient "Wait for me." Before he could look up, Ada turned her head away. Luke's voice sounded in her ear. "Ada, something urgent came up at the company and I need to go back. I'm sorry I can't celebrate New Year's Eve with you," she calmly responded with an appearing as if she hadn't noticed anything on the surface. Yet, only her tightly clenched hands resting on the car hood betrayed her emotions. Luke drove away, leaving within a minute after uttering those words. He was in such a hurry that he forgot he had taken the only car, and he didn't consider how she would get back, and on this mountain, ride-hailing services were never an option. At this thought, her heart felt as if gripped by a large hand, a dull ache spreading through her chest. The second hand returned to its starting position, and fireworks exploded at the foot of the mountain, magnificent and dazzling, truly beautiful. Ada knew this was Luke preparing for her, but now the person who had prepared all this for her was by another woman's side, as if to confirm this thought. Her phone vibrated against her palm. Upon opening it, she saw an unfamiliar number, and the moment she read the content, she guessed it was from Gia Park. She sent a photo of herself sitting in Luke's arms. In the picture, Luke looked down at her with a smile in his eyes, and the background clearly showed they were at home. "We're getting married because Luke has already realized you're not worth it. You should know better and leave as soon as possible." Her hand clenched the phone tightly. Those 3 words pierced her deeply, as if they were being carved into her heart stroke by stroke, permeating every pore and making it hard for her to breathe. The fireworks at the foot of the mountain had ended. Leaving the mountain in darkness and silence, Ada's phone shut down from the cold, and from then on, there was not a single glimmer of light on the mountain, only the faint glow of moonlight illuminating the path. Flurries of snow began to fall from the sky. Ada knew that if she stayed on the mountain, what they would find tomorrow would be her corpse. She had no choice but to start walking down the mountain. When she truly found herself in the darkness, fear crept up her spine. She was actually quite dark-skinned and afraid of ghosts. But Luke seemed to have forgotten about it. She walked the entire mountain path in extreme self-fear and freezing temperatures. Gradually, she even became numb. And it took her 4 hours to reach the place where she could hail a taxi at Park. When she returned home with a pale face and blackened lips, the house was pitch dark. The aunt had already gone back, and Luke stayed by his fiancée's side. Ada twitched her nearly numb lips. Wasn't this how it should be? She was nothing to him. Of course he should be with his fiancée. The next day, Ada was shaken awake. Dazedly opening her eyes, she saw the anxious face of Luke. "Ada, you have a fever. I'm taking you to the hospital." Dazed, she was carried into the car by Luke. Her mind was filled with thoughts. Why is he back? Wasn't he supposed to be with his fiancée? When her consciousness gradually returned, she realized by the bright daylight outside the car window that it was already noon the next day. In the car, Luke held her tightly and rushed her to the emergency room as soon as they arrived at the hospital. Sitting in the consultation room, Ada felt too dizzy to stay upright. Luke stood beside her, holding her in an awkward embrace. Throughout the entire process, Luke remained visibly nervous, repeatedly asking about precautions. When it was time for the 4-drip, the doctor even remarked to her, "You should cherish such a good boyfriend." Instantly, the pungent scent of their intimate encounter flooded her nostrils. Ada let out a light laugh, carrying a faint trace of bitterness. "A great boyfriend. Just got out of his fiancée's bed. Does that count as good?" Throughout the hospital visit, Luke never let her walk, carrying her everywhere they went. When the nurse gave her an injection, Luke cradled her head against his chest, comforting her repeatedly. "It's okay, don't be scared, just a little pinch, it won't hurt," as if she were a child. Yet everything she's going through now is all because of him. She wanted to say she wasn't afraid, that this pain was nothing compared to what terrified her last night, but she didn't say it. Speaking up would only give him another chance to perform. At this moment, he seemed like an attentive boyfriend. No one would guess he actually had a fiancé. Even Ada was nearly fooled. She lay on the hospital bed. Luke tucked the blanket around her and asked if she was still feeling unwell anywhere. Ada shook her head faintly and closed her eyes, refusing to communicate. Gradually, She actually fell asleep, and when she woke up, Luke was no longer by her side. She pulled out the nearly finished 4 and got out of bed, intending to go to the bathroom. When she came out of the restroom, she saw Luke holding Gia's waist as they exited the obstetrician's office. She hid in the restroom but could still hear their conversation. "The baby is already 2 months old. You're a mother now, so you can't be willful anymore," Luke's gentle voice sounded. Gia clung to his arm coquettishly. "Then Luke, you have to keep an eye on me from now on. The baby needs its daddy too." "Okay," Luke spoke dotingly. "All right, with less than half a month until the wedding, you shouldn't worry about anything. Don't tire yourself or the baby." As the voice gradually faded away, Ada stood frozen in place, motionless. By the time she regained her senses, she realized her heart was already twisted in agony. Clutching her chest tightly, she bent over, gasping for breath, as large teardrops began to fall uncontrollably. They already had a child, 2 months along. It turns out they had already been together for 2 months, and she had been kept in the dark for so long. If she hadn't overheard those words that day, how much longer would it have taken for her to find out? Ada let out a bitter laugh, raised her hand to wipe away the wetness on her face, feeling a chill. Upon closer inspection, she realized it was a ring. This ring was given to her by Luke. At the time, he knelt on one knee, nervously looking up at her, his eyes filled with nothing but her. His voice trembling. "Ada, will you be with me for a lifetime? I truly love you, and I vow to marry no one but you." This is actually quite ethereal talk, and any rational person shouldn't believe it, but she believed it. The intensity of her infatuation then matches the depth of her heartbreak now. Ada gathered her emotions and left the place. Her hands were now empty, leaving only a faint ring mark, while an undoubtedly expensive ring remained on the sink. It wasn't until 10 p.m. that Luke hurriedly pushed the door open and entered. As soon as he stepped in, he knelt on one knee before Ada, who was sitting on the sofa. Before she could react, he took out the ring she had just discarded today and gently slipped it back onto her finger, holding her hand. He looked up at her and spoke with adoration. "Darling, didn't you realize you lost your ring? How could you be so careless? Don't lose it again. This is proof of our marriage." The tenderness in his eyes remained, but Ada could no longer recapture the feelings of those bygone days. This relationship had already been tainted by irreparable impurities. Ada didn't answer his question. Instead, she asked, "Where did you go today?" She stared intently into his eyes, precisely catching a fleeting glimpse of guilt, but it lasted only a second before he replied, "I had to handle something at the company. When I returned to the ward, you were already gone." Hearing this, Ada felt deeply exhausted. Without saying a word, she turned her gaze to the television. Luke mistook her silence for displeasure at his lack of communication and said in a coaxing tone, "Honey, how about we go horseback riding at the ranch tomorrow? You've always wanted to go, haven't you? It just so happens the doctor said you need more sunlight." As for his suggestion, Ada remained non-committal. She was already weary of dealing with Luke, who was full of lies. She just wanted to quietly wait until the day of her departure. The next day Luke took her to a horse ranch in the north. Upon arriving, she discovered Gia was also there, previously only mentioned by others. This was her first time meeting Gia. Her distinguished demeanor made it clear at a glance she was a young lady of high status. Standing beside Luke, they looked utterly mismatched. Ada felt waves of bitterness rise in her heart. She had thought that now that the real person had arrived, Luke would no longer pay attention to her, but unexpectedly, he still held her tightly. "Ada, come, let me teach you how to ride a horse." Instead, it was as if he didn't see Gia at all, not even sparing her a glance. He took her to choose a gentle horse, helped her mount it, and taught her how to ride hands-on. She was indeed very interested in horseback riding, and gradually, she forgot about her earlier emotions. After riding for half an hour, she said she was tired. Luke immediately stopped and took her back to rest. They had barely sat down for 2 minutes when Ada noticed that Gia had left the place. Another 2 minutes passed, and Luke said, "Ada, sit here for a while. I'll go get you some water." Ada had initially felt her heart flutter slightly due to his meticulous care, but now it suddenly calmed down. After he walked a few meters away, she silently stood up and followed behind him. She followed him to a secluded area in park, where Gia was already waiting. Gia rushed over as soon as she saw Luke. Luke immediately caught her and frowned as he spoke. "Didn't I say we should pretend not to know each other before the wedding? If Ada makes a scene, it would have a significant impact on both our families." This was something Luke had indeed told her before. But Gia immediately started acting coquettishly. "I missed you, baby." Besides, she didn't notice anything. This she naturally referred to Ada. As soon as these words were spoken, Ada saw Luke relax his furrowed brow with a helpless expression, and then she watched as they kissed, their mouths melded together. Inseparable. Watching all this, Ada felt as if a knife had twisted in her heart, her hands clenched into fists, her nails nearly digging into her palms without her realizing. The sticky, relentless sounds continued to invade her ears, but she didn't torture herself by listening any longer. Staggering unsteadily, he left the area and returned to the rest zone. Half an hour later, Luke returned with a bottle of water in hand. Placing it in front of her, he spoke apologetically. "Honey, I just had to take a phone call. That's why it took so long. You weren't waiting too anxiously, were you?" Hearing this term of endearment, Ada recalled the image of their earlier kiss. Instantly feeling a wave of nausea, she took a sip of water to suppress the disgust. Meanwhile, Luke noticed the bruise on her palm. Worried, he held her hand and asked, "What happened here?" Ada only then realized that her palm had actually been bruised from gripping too tightly. She startled slightly before gently withdrawing her hand. She casually brushed it off. "It must be from holding the reins too tightly just now." Luke was concerned and insisted on taking her to apply medicine. Ada didn't want him touching her and pulled away again, saying, "No need, I'm going riding." Seeing Luke about to follow, she quickly added, "I want to ride alone." He did not follow any further. Ada was riding slowly, somewhat lost in thought, and didn't notice Gia approaching on horseback from the side. By the time she realized what was happening, the horse had already been knocked out of control. Ada was startled and, before the horse could bolt, she let go of the reins and rolled to the side. She fell to the ground and rolled heavily once. Lifting her head, she saw Gia, who had also fallen from the horse, being held in Luke's arms. A sudden pang struck her heart. Luke noticed her too and immediately tried to release Gia from his embrace. Just as he let go, Gia reached out and grabbed him, clutching her stomach weakly as she murmured, "The baby." Ada watched as he froze mid-motion, then wrapped his arms around Gia again. Looking up with apparent distress, he said, "Ada, she's still carrying a child. Let me take her to the hospital first." "Okay." Watching him tightly hold the person in his arms, Ada felt waves of bitterness in her heart. She let out a silent, bitter laugh and responded with a faint millimeter. Having received permission, Luke immediately picked up Gia and rushed out. Ada watched his hurried figure, her heart nearly overflowing with bitterness. A nearby equestrian approached and helped her up from the ground. "Miss, are you hurt anywhere?" She had gotten down in time, so she wasn't seriously injured, just some minor pain, far less than the ache in her heart. Ada shook her head at the equestrian. Thanking him for his kindness, she endured the pain in her body and walked outside the riding arena, only to find the car originally parked in the spot had already been driven away. How familiar this scene was. This time, there was no pain like last time, because she had already anticipated it, hadn't she? She took out her phone, called a ride-hailing service, and went home alone. The exhaustion from the past few days made Ada fall asleep early without waiting for Luke, and she didn't care whether he would return or not. The next morning, she woke up to see Luke sitting by the bed, watching her. Luke had been smiling at her drowsy, just awakened state, but when he noticed the gradual dimming in her eyes, as if they reflected nothing at all, an inexplicable panic rose in his heart. With some unnoticed fluster, he picked up the box on the nightstand. He took out the contents inside and carefully lifted Ada's hand, placing it on her wrist. Then he gently kissed the back of her hand, as if kissing something precious. Luke held her hand and said, "I'm sorry, honey, I didn't take you to the hospital right away yesterday. Gia is pregnant, and she's my friend's, so I should take care of her, don't you think, friend?" Ada lowered her head with a sarcastic curl of her lips. Only then did she shift her gaze to the bracelet, recognizing it as one she had casually praised for its beauty before, a piece of considerable value. Recalling the words she heard in the private room, she murmured, "Not worth it." Luke overheard her, his heart skipping a beat as he hurriedly said, "What are you talking about? What's not worth it? Honey, you're absolutely worth it. You deserve more than this. You deserve all the beauty in the world." Hearing this, Ada let out a light laugh, looked up at him, and said, "Yesterday, I saw a plot on TV where the female lead and male lead were in a relationship. But the female lead got engaged behind the male lead's back. Everyone was discussing whether the male lead should forgive her. What do you think?" Luke played with her hand and casually replied, "Of course he shouldn't forgive her." Ada gently withdrew her hand upon hearing this and said, "I also think he shouldn't forgive her," before he could grab her hand again. Ada said she was hungry. Luke immediately said, "Then I'll cook today. Honey, you go freshen up first, and I'll call you later." With that, he cheerfully went downstairs to cook. Ada watched his retreating figure, seemingly unchanged from before, and took off the bracelet on her wrist. She didn't deserve such an expensive bracelet, just as she didn't deserve him sacrificing his family's interests. 2 days later would be Ada's birthday. Luke, who usually spent it with her, suddenly said he had something to do that day and celebrated with her a day early instead. Ada didn't ask what he had to do. If possible, she didn't even want to celebrate her birthday at all. But when Luke heard her say this, he immediately became serious and said, "I promised to spend every birthday with you. We can't skip it." Hearing this, Ada let out a light laugh and thought to herself, "This is the last time. From now on, you won't be part of any of my birthdays." The cake was placed on the table. Luke lit the candles for her and sang the birthday song, just like every time before. Ada closed her eyes and silently made a wish in her heart. "I hope that after leaving Luke, I can start a brand new life." After making the wish, she blew out the candles. Luke looked at her and asked with a smile what she had wished for. Ada lowered her head to cut the cake, whispering in her heart, "Leaving you." Taking advantage of Lucas' absence that night, Ada packed up her belongings from the house, then dug out all the photos they had taken over the years and burned them in the backyard. Since the emotions these things once carried had vanished, there was no need to keep them anymore. Lucas' gifts to her, she took none of them. What wasn't hers, she wouldn't take, just as Luke, no longer hers, was something she would no longer claim. Keep these safe. She went to get a new phone card. As she wouldn't be using the current one after leaving here, there was no one she needed to contact anyway. After finishing these tasks, she sat in the garden idly scrolling through videos when suddenly she came across a live-streamed interview. The person on screen was someone she recognized, Gia, standing in the center of the screen in a wedding dress, with an arm encircling her waist from off-screen. So the something important was accompanying Gia to try on wedding dresses. The host's voice came through, "The groom doesn't want to show his face, so let's be understanding." "Okay." Then came the first question, "How did you two get together?" Gia laughed and said, "Arranged marriage." The host immediately expressed disbelief. "You two look so sweet together. It doesn't seem like an arranged marriage at all." Gia blushed and smiled shyly. Glancing to the side, Luke's voice came through, "Can't a political marriage also be true love?" The host immediately apologized, saying yes, that's right, and then asked when their wedding would be. Luke tilted his head slightly to look at Gia beside him, his inadvertently revealed eye filled with deep affection. "In 4 days, it will be the grandest wedding, and you'll all see it then." Instantly, the comment section was flooded with 99, all sending their blessings. Gazing at that affectionate profile, Ada's heart felt as if seized by a giant hand, a dull ache spreading through her. The sunlight that should have felt warm upon her skin now only made her feel utterly exposed. Every word of praise and blessing in the comments felt like a knife slowly carving into her flesh. She had no rightful place. She was merely a caged songbird, hidden away in the shadows. Ada let out a self-mocking laugh. Evening Luke came back with a box containing a dress. She recognized it at once as a bridesmaid's dress. Suppressing her heartache, she calmly said, "Do you want me to be a bridesmaid at your wedding?" As soon as the words were spoken, Luke felt a pang of anxiety, thinking she had found out something, and asked blankly, "What, isn't this a bridesmaid's dress?" Ada responded with a light laugh, Luke let out a sigh of relief upon hearing this and immediately threw the dress on the ground, hastily saying, "I'm sorry, honey. I didn't know it was a bridesmaid dress. I'll buy you a new one in a few days." After speaking, he came over and hugged Ada, saying, "If you're the bridesmaid, then who will be my bride? My bride can only be you." Ada lay quietly in his arms, silently adding in her heart, "Of course it's Gia who'll be your bride." In the days leading up to the wedding, Luke stayed home with her. At first she didn't understand why, until the second day when she overheard Luke on the phone. "All right, Gia. I have to keep her calm, don't I? That way there won't be any trouble on the wedding day. Be good, okay?" Upon hearing this, Ada silently curled the corners of her lips, so they were afraid she might discover something and ruin their wedding. They were overthinking it. The night before the wedding, Luke held her tightly in his arms and said, "Ada, stay home tomorrow and don't go out. I'll have a surprise for you when I return in the evening." Ada remained non-committal, but he insisted on her verbal promise, so she reluctantly agreed. The next day Luke got up very early, and before leaving, he bent down to kiss Ada's forehead. After the sound of the engine faded away, Ada silently opened her eyes. She didn't get up, she lay on her side, quietly gazing out the window until dawn broke on the horizon. When she picked up her phone, she realized the internet was already disconnected. After going downstairs, she grabbed the remote and turned on the TV, only to find that even the TV had no signal. At this moment, the housekeeper walked over and spoke somewhat nervously. "Madam, the residential complex is undergoing network maintenance, so there might be no internet all day today." Ada didn't show any expression on her face and said softly, "Then I'll go out for a walk later." The housekeeper froze for a moment, rubbing her hands together before speaking. The master asked you to wait for him at home." Seeing her nervous demeanor, Ada vaguely noticed two bodyguards dressed in black standing at the entrance through the window. She roughly understood in her heart, this was Luke's method of keeping her in the dark, confining her at home. But paper can never contain fire. Even if she didn't know today, she would eventually find out. Ada let out a silent, cold laugh. Without giving the housekeeper a hard time, she simply said, "Fine, I'll go upstairs to rest. No need to call me unless necessary." Back in her room, Ada packed the last of her belongings into the suitcase, then took out the gift box she had bought. She placed her ring and the bracelet inside, leaving a note, "Wishing you a happy marriage." Then she tore the sheets into strips, tied them together, and threw them down from the second floor to climb down. She was never a caged bird. Luke couldn't keep her confined. After leaving the villa, she took out the SIM card from her phone and threw it into a nearby flower bed, then inserted a new one. Ada went to the defunct company, obtained her new identity and the plane ticket they had purchased for her. Just as she was about to hail a cab to the airport, an exclamation came from nearby. "Look, how romantic." She looked up to see a large screen in the square, broadcasting live footage of Luke's wedding ceremony. The wedding was grand, worthy of the title Wedding of the Century. At the center of the stage stood Gia in her wedding dress and Luke in his black suit. They looked so perfectly matched. Discussions could be heard from the side. What a fairy tale romance. A perfect match of talent and beauty. They're absolutely made for each other. Yeah, I heard the male park gave the female park a sky-high betrothal gift, practically treating her like a princess during the wedding. So envious. On the screen, the couple began exchanging rings. Luke's ring had already been taken off, and the tan line from years of wear was concealed with foundation. Next came the groom kissing the bride. Ada lowered her aching neck and adjusted her baseball cap. Gasps sounded around her. She had watched his wedding to the end, only to find the bride wasn't her. Ada smiled self-deprecatingly, wiped away a tear that had fallen unnoticed, then turned and hailed a taxi to the airport. Upon arriving at the airport, she waited in the departure lounge. While checking the time, her phone suddenly buzzed with an entertainment news alert. Almost as if possessed, she clicked on it and saw her own name. Her name was sandwiched between that newlywed couple. The exposé claimed she was the other woman who seduced Luke to wreck their relationship. As expected, this kind of thing still happened. She became the universally despised mistress. How shameless can this woman be? Good heavens. A girl from a small village dares to aim high and climb the social ladder by targeting Hayes's only son. She should take a piss and look at herself in the mirror first. Amid the curses around her, Ada knew they hadn't recognized her. Yet she still felt utterly exposed. She had no intention of defending herself. Because after today, there would no longer be Ada in this world. She would leave behind everything from her past. Half an hour before the plane took off, she stood up and walked toward the boarding gate. As she made her way, snippets of their conversation gradually reached her ears. Why did the groom run out of the banquet hall? How could he just abandon the bride like that? But she kept walking without pause, resolutely heading towards the boarding gate. As the plane took off, she left everything behind, ready to start a brand new life. Wedding venue. Luke had just stepped down from the stage. Gia, holding his arm, was about to toast with him. Worried that something might have happened to Ada, he took out his phone to check, only to stumble upon that explosive revelation. His heart suddenly tightened, and he immediately dialed Ada's number, only to hear that her phone was turned off. Beside him, Gia noticed he seemed stunned and tugged at his hand. "Luke, it's time to toast the guests." Luke shook off her hand and was about to rush out of the banquet hall when Hayes' mother, seeing his frantic urgency, quickly stopped him. "Luke, where are you going? If you leave, where will Gia's dignity be placed? Where will the dignity of the Hayes family be placed?" These words Luke did not take in. His mind was filled with panic at the thought that Ada might have discovered something. Ignoring the dissuasion, he bypassed them and left the wedding venue directly. Once in the car, he instructed the driver to take him straight home. Before the car had even come to a complete stop at the entrance, he couldn't wait to open the door and step out. The bodyguards at the door, seeing his flustered appearance, were left puzzled. Luke paid them no mind and went straight inside, opening the door. After scanning the living room and not seeing Ada, he asked the housekeeper who had just come out, "Where's my wife?" The housekeeper was startled by his demeanor and replied, "Madam is resting upstairs." Without waiting for her to finish, Luke strode upstairs in large steps, opening the room door. The bed was empty, and with a quick glance, he spotted the cloth strip by the window. Seeing the cloth strip, his face darkened instantly. The strip clearly led all the way to the first floor. Ada had obviously used it to escape. At this thought, Luke felt a surge of anger rise in his heart. He turned and roared at the bodyguards who had followed him. "Didn't I tell you to keep an eye on her? What's the use of you if you can't even guard a single person?" The bodyguards outside the door all lowered their heads, not daring to make a sound. Luke took a deep breath and growled, "What are you waiting for? Go find her." The bodyguards all responded in succession and ran out. Luke raised his hand to rub his temples, the anger in his head refusing to dissipate. He couldn't bear to think about what she might see after running out. His and Gia's wedding was being broadcast live, which was why he had confined her at home today and cut off the internet, just to prevent her from finding out. But now she had run out. Gradually, anger was replaced by panic. He lowered his hand, his eyes sweeping over the room, and noticed the gift box he had overlooked in his haste. Instinct told him this was Ada left for him. He walked over in a daze, his hands trembling uncontrollably as he opened it. The first thing that caught his eye was an A4 sheet with the words, "Wishing you a happy marriage." His mind buzzed, and a look of shock flashed across his eyes. When he took out the note, beneath it were the ring and bracelet he had given her. In an instant, he recalled the expression on her face when she mentioned the bridesmaid dress. She had known all along. That was why she ran away. When did she find out? Luke desperately retraced her recent unusual behavior and suddenly grasped a crucial moment. The bar. That day, he had asked her to pick him up, but in the end, she didn't come. Now, thinking back, did she really not show up? This realization froze the blood in his limbs. Stiffly, he took out his phone and dialed a number. He heard his own numb voice say, "Send me the surveillance footage from outside the private room on the evening of December 30th. Before long, a video was sent over. With trembling hands, he clicked on it and saw a person standing at the entrance of their private room. Luke clearly recognized that the person was Ada. At that moment, the voices of the people inside the private room reached his ears through the video. When the words "not worth it" were spoken, he saw her figure suddenly stiffen, as if enduring some immense pain. Witnessing this scene, Luke felt a dull ache in his heart, and he raised his hand to cover the throbbing pain. How much pain must she have been in at that time? Why couldn't he just keep his mouth shut? In remorse, he slapped himself hard across the face. All those clumsy excuses he had made over the past half-month were nothing but a joke in her eyes. She had been watching him perform. In an instant, he thought of the ring he had picked up at the hospital. Realizing that perhaps it wasn't something she had accidentally dropped at all, the dull ache in his heart sharpened into a twisting knife. The pain so intense it left him breathless. The room looked empty, seemingly unchanged, but he knew deep down that so much was missing. He searched every corner of the room but found nothing that belonged to her. The only things she left behind were the words of blessing that pierced his heart, and that ring, finally. Luke realized she wasn't coming back. At that moment, his phone suddenly vibrated. Luke snapped out of it, thinking they had found Ada, and quickly answered the call. Director Hayes, we've tracked Mrs. S phone card location. It's right in the neighborhood. Hearing this, Luke was stunned for a moment, then quickly asked them to send the details. Although he knew she couldn't still be in the neighborhood, he wouldn't miss any chance to find her. The location wasn't far. Luke ran there in less than 5 minutes. No one was there, only a phone card found in the grass. The lead was broken again. Luke returned home in despair. He sat on the sofa, his heart filled with torment. Ada had no friends here. He couldn't think of where she might have gone, and this sense of the unknown intensified his torment. Suddenly, his phone rang. Luke picked it up without looking and held it to his ear. "Luke, brother, my stomach hurts. Can you come keep me company?" Gia's voice didn't make him feel any better. In fact, it made him feel worse. He growled into the phone in a low voice, "Your stomach hurts. Why didn't it just kill you with the pain?" After saying this, he hung up the phone and threw it aside in irritation. Before long, the phone rang again like a relentless alarm. Luke knew it must be his mother calling to demand an explanation. He didn't answer, but the calls didn't stop. Finally, he picked up. As soon as he answered, his mother's furious voice erupted from the other end. "Luke, what on earth were you thinking today? You left in the middle of the wedding, abandoning all those guests and Gia. Hayes family's reputation has been completely tarnished by you. Park family is extremely dissatisfied with your behavior. You need to come back and apologize to them immediately." Compared to his mother's anger, Luke could be described as calm, but his voice when he spoke was bone-chillingly cold. "If they're dissatisfied, then let them leave. Do I need to list out all the benefits they've taken from this marriage?" On the other end came the sound of his mother's angry panting. Luke hung up immediately after speaking. As he lowered his head, he caught sight of the ring on his finger, the one he had just exchanged with Gia during the wedding ceremony. He froze for a moment, then quickly pulled it off and hurled it away with force. Then he hurriedly ran upstairs, took out the ring he had placed on the bedside table that morning, and carefully put it back on. Seeing the ring reappear on his hand, he felt a momentary peace, but when his gaze fell upon the ring that Ada had left behind forever, his heart ached with a dense, piercing pain. Trembling, he picked it up, overwhelmed with regret for the decision he had made back then. He once genuinely wanted to protect their love as well. He had also fought back fiercely, and every promise he made to her was sincere when spoken. So when did it start to change? Was it when his mother desperately urged him to consider the family's interests? In the past, he had indeed treated such matters as nothing, but later, after joining the company, he began to care about these things, about the company's interests, the family's interests. When he accepted the arranged marriage, he thought it was just that, an arrangement, merely for the sake of family interests. Even that child was only meant to leave behind a legitimate heir. It was him who wanted both a marriage that could benefit the family and Ada. It was his insatiable greed that led to this situation. If he had stayed true to his original intentions and refused the marriage alliance with the Park family, then he and Ada wouldn't have ended up like this. They would have had a lovely child, and Ada would have been waiting for him at home every night. Now, everything has been ruined by him. And now he regretted it beyond measure. Luke slumped to the ground, clutching his head in agony. The air fell silent. When suddenly he remembered the reason for his return, pulling out his phone, he saw the online controversy escalating wildly. Few knew about his marriage to Gia. making it clear this was someone's deliberate scheme. Ada must have seen it too. She was the one who had always been by his side. Yet now, because of him, she was being labeled as the despised other woman. How much pain must she be feeling in her heart? Luke felt a surge of murderous intent in his eyes at the thought. He took out his phone and called his assistant. Find out who was behind today's leak. The assistant on the other end was startled by the coldness in his tone and quickly responded affirmatively. After hanging up, Luke stood up, took a chain, and strung the ring Ada had left behind, wearing it around his neck. He would keep this ring safe for her until she returned to his side. At 10 o'clock in the evening, the assistant called back. Hayes has found out. It was Park who instructed the marketing accounts to release it. Hearing this, Luke tightened his grip on the phone, his eyes flashing with cold fury as he gritted out a few words. So it was her. He had reminded Gia more than once not to bring this matter before Ada, and had also told her their marriage was purely political. She shouldn't read too much into it. She had been very obedient all this time. But who would have thought that behind that obedience was a big storm waiting to happen? After hanging up, he then dialed Gia's number. Gia thought he was calling to coax her, so she started acting coquettishly as soon as she picked up. Luke, big brother, the baby misses you and is kicking me. Come see him, okay? Luke let out a cold laugh upon hearing this. Not only is it impossible for a 2-month-old fetus to be kicking her, but after she went against his warning and did such a thing, she could still say these words to him with a straight face. Didn't I warn you not to bring this before Ada? You just turned a deaf ear to my words and slandered Ada online. On the other end of the phone, Gia, hearing his voice as cold as ice, trembled as she held her phone. He knew everything. Her heart pounded uncontrollably with fear, but her voice remained calm in a desperate attempt to bluff her way through. Luke, what are you talking about? I don't understand at all. Luke directly snorted coldly. You don't know. Do I need to throw your transfer records in your face? Ada's suffering. I will reclaim every bit of it. After fiercely uttering these words, he hung up the phone. On the other end of the line, Gia was completely panicked by the dial tone of the hung-up call, even dropping her phone to the ground. She frantically thought about how to save herself. Knowing that Luke was capable of anything, she would never forget the gloom on his face when he warned her, just as she was panicking. She thought of the child in her womb. Yes, she was still carrying Hayes' child. Hayes' mom would never stand by and do nothing. She anxiously picked up the phone from the ground and dialed Hayes' mom's number. As soon as the call connected, she cried out, "Mom, Luke wants to hit me because of Ada. And he's even threatening to abort the baby in my womb." Her voice was full of grievance. Hayes' mother immediately felt heartbroken. "What kind of thing is Ada? This is my grandson. Who dares to touch him? Even his father can't do it. Gia, don't be afraid. Mom is coming right now to protect you." When Luke arrived with his men, Gia's doorstep was already guarded by several bodyguards. He recognized them as his mother's people and frowned in irritation. "Get these people out of here." The bodyguards behind him immediately followed the order and restrained the few people blocking the way. Luke walked in unimpeded and saw his mother in the living room holding Gia, who was crying pitifully. Seeing him enter, Hayes' mother spoke with displeasure on her face. "Gia is already our family's daughter-in-law. Don't you dare harm her." After speaking, she waved her hand to signal the bodyguards to block his path, preventing him from getting closer. Seeing Gia playing the victim and even bringing up her mother to stop him, Luke felt a vein bulge on his forehead. But he still tried to speak calmly. "Mom, stay out of this." Hayes' mother was instantly infuriated by his words, her tone laced with anger. "What do you mean stay out of it? This is my daughter-in-law and my grandchild. As long as I'm alive, don't you dare hurt them because of that little sparrow Ada." These words enraged Luke completely. He growled, "Enough. That's my lover. Mom, even you can't talk about her like that." After saying this, he took a step back and spoke coldly. "Escort my mother and these troublesome people outside." The bodyguards obeyed, immediately dragging everyone in the room outside. Hayes' mother was so enraged by his indifferent attitude that her face turned crimson. Being forcibly dragged out, she shouted, "Luke, I'm your mother. If you dare do anything to my grandson, I won't let you off." As the door closed, Hayes' mother's curses were shut outside. leaving only Luke and Gia inside the house. Gia wiped the tears from her face, now filled with terror as she huddled in the corner of the sofa, watching him warily. Luke walked toward her step by step, his eyes devoid of any warmth. Gia, I warned you not to provoke Ada. You could have just quietly remained as Mrs. Hayes, but you just had to recklessly mess with her. As he drew closer, Gia felt her panic nearly overflowing. The only person who could protect her had already been driven outside by Luke. She was like prey exposed under the watchful eyes of a starving wolf. At any moment, she could be killed with a single strike from him. She let go of the pillow she had been clutching tightly and threw herself at him, pleading pitifully, I'm sorry, Brother Luke, I was just confused for a moment. I never meant to hurt her, I just wanted to have you so badly, Brother Luke. I know I was wrong. Will you forgive me? She wept with pearly tears, doing her utmost to display her most pitiable side, hoping he would let her go as he had before, but this time it didn't work. Luke loathed her and loathed himself even more. If it weren't for her appearance, Ada would never have left him. Luke reached out, gripping her chin harshly, his deep, ink-like eyes silently fixed on her as his thin lips coldly uttered, It's all because of you that Ada left me. I wish I could make you die 1,000 deaths. And you still expect me to forgive you? He didn't hold back his strength at all, and soon, Gia's cheeks were left bruised, under such a gaze. Gia's eyes were filled with terror as she clutched at her last lifeline, pleading for mercy. No, the child, there's still the child. Luke, I'm carrying your child, it's your child, you can't just abandon it. Her eyes, filled with plea, gazed into his, hoping to find a trace of emotion, but there was nothing. Those eyes held only an unchanging coldness from start to finish, with not a shred of the warmth they once had remaining. A child? Do you think I care, as long as it's not Ada's child? Then there's nothing for me to hold on to. With that, he grabbed her wrist and dragged her toward the door. Gia was dragged along the ground, struggling incessantly. Luke, you can't do this to me. You mustn't treat me like this. You loved me so much before, just yesterday. His gaze at her had been so tender, and they had exchanged vows at their wedding. A cold snort came from the front park, and Luke said icily, The only one I've ever loved is Ada. As for you, you're merely a marriage of convenience. Hearing these words, Gia stopped struggling. So all those sweet words from before had been lies. The door opened, and she was dragged all the way to the car, her body scraping against the ground, sending waves of searing pain. Hayes' mother had been waiting outside the door the whole time without leaving. Seeing this scene, she immediately panicked, breaking free from the bodyguards who didn't dare to hold her too tightly, and rushed forward to grab Luke's arm. Luke, how could you treat her like this? She's carrying your child. Luke stopped his action of throwing Gia into the car, turned to look at his mother, and said, There won't be one soon. Taking advantage of Hayes' momentary daze, he lifted his hand and shoved Gia into the car, instructing the driver to head straight to the hospital. This was a private hospital. Luke had already made arrangements in advance, and the operating room was ready. Their arrival at the hospital immediately drew attention, as the woman being dragged was struggling fiercely, clearly not there of her own free will, but intimidated by the group of bodyguards surrounding them. No one dared to intervene. No, my child, don't abort him. Luke, I truly know I was wrong. Please spare the child. I'm begging you. At this moment, the surrounding crowd recognized these two as the couple who had just held their extravagant wedding yesterday. This immediately sparked discussions. What's going on? Didn't they seem deeply in love just yesterday? Yeah, wasn't there a rumor yesterday about them having a mistress? Could it be because of her? Luke ignored the comments and directly threw Gia into the operating room. Staring at the cold operating table in the room, Gia felt despair. As the operating room door closed before her eyes, she rushed forward and kept pounding on it. Luke, please, I beg you. Luke left the operating room without looking back, only to run into Park's father, who was raising his hand to strike him. Luke, you beast. With lightning reflexes, he raised his hand to grab his wrist, then flung it away fiercely, glaring coldly at him. Keep those words for your own daughter. Park's father's neck flushed red with rage, his trembling finger pointing accusingly. That was your child. For the sake of an Ada, you actually killed your own child. You've been blinded by that seductive homewrecker. Shut up, Luke roared. She's not a homewrecker, she's my beloved. You know exactly how things really were. How dare you say such things now? Park, Ada. Luke, Park eyes. Luke, Park. With that, he threw the handkerchief at Park Sr.'s feet, raising his eyes to gaze coldly at him. Park Sr. and the approaching Hayes matriarch were both so furious they could barely breathe, looking as if they might faint at any moment. Luke considerately suggested, "Escort Park uncle and my mother to the ward to wait. Lest they faint and we can't provide timely medical attention." The bodyguards obeyed without regard for their wishes, leading them to the ward. And the area immediately fell silent. The onlookers dared not make a sound as they watched the group of black-clad bodyguards. Half an hour later, the light in the operating room went out, and the doctor came out to announce that the surgery was successful. Upon receiving the news that the child had been lost, Luke turned around and left immediately, without staying a second longer. It wasn't until after returning that day Luke learned that the scene at the hospital had been secretly filmed and posted online. Instantly, the internet was flooded with curses. Did that mistress really manage to take her place successfully? But this man is really despicable. Actually aborting his own child because of a mistress. That girl is so pitiful. I agree with the above. That mistress is shameless. I hope I never see her in real life, or I'll definitely beat her up. People who destroy others' families deserve to go to hell. Luke trembled as he scrolled through these comments, each sentence stabbing into his heart like a knife. Yet he continued to read the comments as if punishing himself, as though this way, he could somehow feel Ada's pain when she saw that expose. Just moments ago, he had called his assistant to ask if there was any news, but the answer remained the same, no updates whatsoever. He sank into deep helplessness. Unsure how to find her and bring her back to his side, online public opinion is becoming increasingly severe. Luke chose to clarify at the peak of the controversy. Hayes Group's conference room, "I disagree. As soon as we clarify, the company's interest will be hit, and the stock price will definitely fall." Hayes Sr. sat at the head of the table and slammed the table heavily. Other shareholders also spoke up. "I disagree as well. It's just entertainment news. It'll blow over after a while." Exactly, Ada was wronged. Can't we just compensate her with some money? Luke, don't act on impulse. It's just a few words. People will forget about it soon. The internet has no memory. Luke played absent-mindedly with the pen in his hand, neither agreeing nor disagreeing with what they said. When they had almost finished speaking, he made the final decision. "I am definitely holding this press conference. If anything goes wrong, I'll take responsibility, so you don't need to worry about it. This meeting is just to inform you, not to discuss." With that, he left the entire conference room behind and walked out. After only a few steps, he heard Hayes Sr.'s stern voice from behind. "Luke." He stopped in his tracks but did not turn around. Hayes softened his voice. "Don't rush into a decision. We can offer any amount to Ada. Go ask for her opinion. Maybe she'll agree." Hearing this, Luke lowered his head with a mocking smile and said, "She won't take it. She wouldn't take anything. Not even him anymore." Luke suppressed the heart-wrenching pain and forced himself to walk out of the meeting room. The next day, he held a press conference and also brought Gia along. He demanded her to make a public apology. This press conference wasn't live-streamed. He hoped Ada would see it. At the start of the press conference, he sincerely addressed the camera. "Everything online is false rumors. I fell in love with Ada in college, while Gia is merely my arranged marriage partner. Regarding this arranged marriage, Ada was completely unaware. Yes, I deceived her, and I will spend the rest of my life making amends." His gaze was sincere, as if Ada would surely be watching from across the way. Luke finished speaking and glanced at the haggard Gia beside him. Seeing her bow her head with no intention of speaking, he covered the microphone and said coldly, "Park family's reputation or your own face. Think carefully." Gia stiffened at his words. Recalling what Luke had said before taking the stage, he said that as long as he didn't clarify, there would be no place for the Park family in City A. Gia knew Luke could do it, and in the end, she spoke up. She confessed her actions, apologized to Ada, and the countless cameras pointed at her made her feel as if she had been stripped bare and exposed to the public. Humiliated, she wished she could crawl into a hole and hide, after seeing this press conference online. The public opinion immediately shifted. People in the comments were apologizing to Ada and instead started cursing Gia and Luke, even going to Hayes' official Park account to leave angry comments. For a time, Hayes' stock price dropped, and their reputation was also affected. At this moment, Luke was kneeling in Hayes Sr.'s study. After the incident, Hayes' father flew into a rage and immediately summoned Luke home, forcing him to kneel in the study. "Look at the mess you've made. Everyone would have moved on soon enough, and it would have been best for all, but you just had to ignore advice and hold that press conference. Now look, stock prices have plummeted, and the daily losses are incalculable." Luke paid no heed to these words, stiffening his neck and retorting defiantly, "I couldn't let the love of my life live under the stigma of being called a homewrecker forever, so now you realize she's the love of your life. Why didn't you think of that when you agreed to the arranged marriage?" Hayes' father directly interrupted him by raising his voice. Initially, Luke agreed to the arranged marriage thinking he had already prepared to break things off with Ada, but to his surprise, he actually intended to keep both relationships going. At this thought, Hayes' father angrily threw the cup in his hand directly at him. "It serves her right to leave you. You brought all of this upon yourself." These words deeply wounded Luke's heart, as this had always been his deepest pain. Now it was so easily spoken by his father. His heart felt as if gripped by a large hand, a dull pain spreading through him. Hayes' father continued, "Even at this point, you still can't see clearly, since she's already gone. Isn't all this you're doing just a futile effort?" Luke pressed a hand against his aching heart, raised his head, and looked firmly at his father. "I don't care about any of that. All I care about is Ada. I'll find a way to recover the losses the company has suffered, and I won't give up on Ada either. I will definitely win her back." With that, he ignored his father's disappointed expression, stood up, and left his parents' home, returning to the house he shared with Ada. Back home, the scent that belonged to Ada had vanished, and all her belongings were gone. He recalled the messages he had seen on Gia's phone and began to regret why he hadn't cooked Ada's favorite dishes for her that day. That day was the first time in a long while, and the last, that he cooked for her, yet he had skipped her favorites, finding it too troublesome. That evening Luke asked the aunt to buy a lot of groceries, all of which were Ada's favorites. He spent 3 hours cooking a table full of dishes. With an empty bowl placed across the table, Luke sat down, methodically placing food into the empty bowl across from him as if Ada were still there. "Ada, eat up. These are all your favorite dishes." After picking up the food, he lowered his head and shoveled the rice in his bowl, one mouthful after another. Silent tears fell, mixing with the rice as it entered his mouth. At night, he lay down on Ada's usual side of the bed to sleep. In his dream, he saw Ada, standing a few steps away from him in the park, smiling at him. She seemed to be saying something, but he couldn't hear a word. His tone carried a sense of urgency. "Ada, what are you saying? I can't hear you." As he spoke, he stepped forward, but no matter how much he walked, he couldn't reach her, nor could he hear the words from her mouth. Luke grew increasingly panicked, and he began to run. Finally, he ran up to her and clearly heard what she said. She said, "Wishing you a happy marriage." Luke suddenly woke up with a start, propping himself up in bed only to realize it was all a dream. But as the panic from the dream faded, the despair of reality came flooding back. Ada had truly left him, and she had genuinely wished him well. Even though he wasn't happy, the pain in his heart surged like a tidal wave, making it almost impossible for him to breathe. His trembling hands clutched his head as he spoke helplessly. I'm sorry, Ada. I know I was wrong. Please, don't make it so I can't find you. Come out and see me, please. I really can't take it anymore." After that day, Ada seemed to have vanished into thin air, leaving no trace, no matter how many connections he used. He couldn't find her. His emotions gradually crumbled under such despair. "Ada, where on earth are you?" His hunched shoulders trembled slightly, his eyes gradually moistening as tears blurred his vision, occasional sobs filled with despair and helplessness. Later, he tightly hugged Ada's pillow and fell asleep. The next day, Luke dressed neatly and went to the company. During the day, he worked at the company to compensate for the losses caused by the incident. Staying until 11 or 12 at night every day before leaving work. In the past, he would never have worked this late. Because Ada was afraid of the dark, he always went home early to be with her. But now, as he recalled what he had done during this time, his heart twisted with pain. He had left Ada, who was afraid of the dark, alone on the mountain to make her way down by herself, while he stayed in the warmth of home with Gia, for a moment. He wished he could travel back in time and kill the version of himself who did such a thing, so that Ada would at least still have some lingering feelings for him, right? But now, no words are of any use, what's done is done, and Ada still hasn't been found to this day. Every day when he returns home, though his body is exhausted, his nerves remain on edge. He fears missing any news about Ada the moment it arrives. He can only rely on alcohol to fall asleep, and once drunk, he picks up his phone to send Ada apology messages. The next morning, he woke up to countless green chat bubbles on his phone, but not a single response. Every day passed like this, and his exhaustion became visibly apparent, seeing him in such a state. His friends kindly invited him out for drinks to help him vent his emotions. In the private room, the group had no idea how to comfort him in his despondent state, but fortunately, he didn't need their comfort anyway. He silently drank glass after glass of alcohol, soon becoming so drunk he no longer knew where he was. He collapsed onto the sofa, his fingers constantly caressing the ring hanging around his neck, murmuring, I'm sorry, Ada. I love you, I truly love you, please forgive me, come back to me, please, I can't live without you, I really can't live without you." Everyone in the private room was shocked by the scene, never expecting Luke to love Ada to such an extent. It was as if Ada's departure had taken his soul with her. When he entered the arranged marriage, they thought he had moved on, treating her like a caged canary. Little did they know this love had taken root deep in his heart. When the assistant's call came through, Luke was in the middle of a crucial meeting. But when he heard there was news from over there, he immediately waved his hand to dismiss the meeting. The assistant sent over a few photos and said, "This is a popular influencer homestay that's trending right now. These photos captured the owner's appearance. He looks very much like his wife." He still called her Ada Madam, because Luke hadn't said to change it, so he didn't dare to. This was the only message in half a year. Luke looked at the photo on his phone. Only a side profile was captured, but he still recognized it as his Ada. She looked happy in the photo, and this discovery relieved him. Because she hadn't been affected by that incident, it also made his heart ache, because he wasn't sure whether it was only that matter that didn't affect her, or if it included him as well. But he couldn't think about that anymore now. He had to go find her. He couldn't wait another moment. He asked his assistant to book him the earliest flight available, but the assistant said, "Hayes, you have a very important client meeting tonight. Go meet him for me. Tell him I'm sick and about to die. So I can't see him." With that, he hung up the phone, grabbed the suit jacket from the chair, and hurried downstairs toward the airport. U-Town. Ada came here after leaving a city. It's a relatively remote park, with few people and a very simple, honest local culture. It was what she loved, and after settling down, she opened a guest house here. The guest house had a great seaside view and gradually became popular. More and more people came. She devoted herself entirely to running the guest house and had almost forgotten about Luke, until one day, about a dozen steps outside the door, in park, she saw someone who looked extremely familiar. After half a year, Luke felt his eyes sting when he finally saw the person he had been longing for day and night. He stared at her intently through the crowd, but Ada only glanced at him before turning away and heading back to the guest house to continue her work. Ada was somewhat surprised that Luke had found her so quickly. She had seen that press conference too, and watching Luke and Gia apologize stirred no emotions in her heart. What's done is done, and no amount of talking will change it. Even if he comes looking, it still won't make a difference. Watching Ada glance at him briefly before turning to go inside, Luke felt a pang of bitterness, but he didn't follow her in immediately. There are too many people outside right now, and going after her might only upset her. He couldn't afford to make her unhappy again. Besides, now that she's within sight, half the weight in his heart has already lifted. outside the window, he stared fixedly at her busy figure, the longing in his heart almost bursting through his chest. As long as he sincerely apologizes, Ada will surely forgive him. She definitely will. He stood motionless outside until dusk. Ada could still feel the scorching gaze from outside all the while. She knew she couldn't avoid it, so after the crowd thinned, she handed things over to the front desk and walked out toward Luke. When she reached him, Ada didn't stop walking but softly uttered 3 words, "Follow me." Luke's eyes lit up at her words, and he quickly followed. Ada walked to a less crowded area of the park before stopping, then turned to face the Luke behind her and said coldly, "What are you doing here?" Hearing her words that sounded like an accusation, Luke flashed a hurt look in his eyes, then he walked up to Ada with his head lowered and spoke hoarsely, "Ada, I'm sorry. I know I was wrong. I've already called off the engagement, and I've clarified the online rumors. I'm sorry." Ada watched his repentance calmly, her heart as still as water. Did you ever imagine he would be like this? Actually, she had thought about it. During the time right after leaving, she would picture in her heart the look of regret on his face. But after living here for the past 6 months, she had already let go in her heart. Whether he regretted it or not had nothing to do with her now, so she just watched quietly, without saying a word, under Ada's silent gaze. Luke's palms grew slightly sweaty, his heart pounding with nervousness. He felt like a sinner awaiting judgment, uncertain of his fate, waiting anxiously. A minute later, Ada spoke, "This has nothing to do with me anymore, and you don't need to come looking for me." Hearing these clearly rejecting words, Luke's heart instantly sank to the depths. A torrent of sorrow surged into his chest, completely overwhelming him. He looked up at her in confusion, only to meet her cold, emotionless eyes. For a moment, he froze in place, his heart filled with panic. Helplessly, he stammered, "Ada, I really know I was wrong. Please forgive me. I love you, Ada. I truly can't live without you. Enough, no one is indispensable to another, since we've come to this point. You should just go back and proceed with the arranged marriage. Stop bothering me." Ada interrupted him with a disgusted frown. She knew Luke's love was genuine, but so was his betrayal. This reality was far more tangible than love, and moreover, she no longer wanted any love tainted with such filth. After saying that, she tried to step past him to return to the shop, but as she walked by, a hand grabbed her. "Ada, no, I won't go through with the arranged marriage. I only love you." Ada didn't want to listen to his belated excuses. Her expression turning cold, she looked at that distinctly knuckled hand and spoke coldly, "Let go." Despite his utmost reluctance, Luke still let go. The moment he released his grip, Ada left without looking back. As if avoiding him like some kind of plague, the sound of footsteps behind him gradually faded away. He weakly clenched his now empty palm. Feeling Ada's lingering warmth, Luke wandered homeless through the night. The streetlights casting his shadow on the roadside, his heart felt hollow and unsettled, like a dog aimlessly wandering after being abandoned by its owner. He never expected Ada to be so resolute. Had he never thought about it, or perhaps he simply didn't dare to, he couldn't accept her leaving him. Not even in his imagination. But now the illusion has shattered, and the stark reality is laid bare before him. He can no longer turn a blind eye, and the panic of losing Ada engulfs him completely. If none of this had happened, if he hadn't agreed to the arranged marriage, they should be embracing at home right now, watching TV and laughing together. Now all of this has been destroyed by him, destroyed by his own hands. At this thought, his heart felt as if it were being torn apart. Clutching his aching chest, he slowly knelt to the ground. Memories of past happiness flashed through his mind. Luke pulled out the ring hanging around his neck and gently pressed a kiss to it. He silently vowed, "I will win you back." He chased her for 3 years in the past, and now he's willing to chase her for another 3 years. As long as she comes back, he'd even chase her for a decade. The next day, he went to Ada's shop to check in. He deliberately chose times when there were fewer people and only Ada was present, so he could talk to her. Ada paused for a moment when she saw him enter, then resumed her usual cold tone and said, "I told you not to come looking for me again." Hearing her unhesitating dismissal, Luke's expression stiffened for just a moment before he forced a smile. "I'm here to stay. Isn't this a guest house?" As he spoke these words, Luke wore an expression of utter innocence, as if he truly had come only to lodge. After yesterday, he had already decided. No matter what face Ada made at him, he would pretend not to see it, because he deserved all of this. He had hurt her so deeply. What did his own pain amount to in comparison? Ada couldn't bring herself to kick him out when she saw him like this, so she coldly checked him in. In the following days, Luke didn't bother her again, but she could always feel a burning gaze, yet whenever she followed the gaze, Luke would only show her his profile. Yes, Luke never left, settling in as if this were his home. From his endless phone calls and constant attachment to his laptop, Ada guessed he must be very busy. Ada thought she had made herself perfectly clear that day, so she couldn't understand why he was still lingering here. These days, Luke showed no intention of speaking to her, and she didn't feel right about directly asking him to leave, so she had no choice but to let it be. That night, Ada noticed there were no vegetables left at home, so she went to the supermarket to buy some. The supermarket wasn't particularly close to the guest house, but Ada decided not to take a taxi and instead walked back while browsing along the way. Little did she know that this casual stroll would lead to trouble. Halfway there, she encountered a group of drunk troublemakers. They reeked of alcohol, their lips curled into lewd smiles as they surrounded her. "Hey beautiful, what's a girl like you doing out alone so late at night?" Ada frowned and said coldly, "Get lost." Having been here for so long, she had never encountered such a situation before. Today was purely an accident. Hearing this, they showed no intention of backing off. Instead, they all laughed and closed in even tighter around her. Ada rarely felt a hint of panic. Just as she was about to fight desperately, someone suddenly shouted loudly. Turning to look, she saw Luke twisting a drunkard's arm behind his back. Ada was stunned. The others, seeing he was alone, breathed a sigh of relief and rushed forward to teach the troublemaker a lesson. But after all, they were drunk, and despite their numbers, they were no match and eventually fled. As soon as those people left, Luke nervously grabbed Ada's shoulders and asked anxiously, "Ada, are you hurt anywhere? Did they touch you?" Ada shook her head faintly and gently freed herself from his grasp. Seeing she was unharmed, Luke finally let out a sigh of relief. After the fight, Luke inevitably ended up with injuries too. The dark bruise on his face stood out starkly against his fair skin. Noticing Ada looking at the injury on his face, he immediately covered it and pretended to wince in pain. Seeing his exaggerated act, Ada lightly rolled her eyes, then turned and walked away. Luke was stunned for a moment before lowering his hand and following. He followed her all the way to the place she was staying at the homestay park, and just as Soda was about to open the door, Luke finally couldn't help but reach out and grab her, speaking in a somewhat aggrieved tone. "I didn't have dinner today. I'm so hungry." Ada heard this and looked at him coldly, while he met her gaze without flinching. He didn't know if this move would work, but as long as there was the slightest chance, he would try it. Finally Ada walked in without saying a word, but left the door open. Luke knew this meant permission to enter, and instantly felt fireworks of joy exploding in his heart. After entering, he casually sat down on the sofa, observing the layout of the house, not willing to miss a single corner. "It seems this way I can piece together the life she lived in those 6 months after she left." Without his involvement, Ada went straight to the kitchen to cook. She assumed Luke came in not out of soft-heartedness, but to take the opportunity to make him leave, to stop lingering here. There would be no outcome. After half an hour, she brought out a bowl of noodles and placed it on the dining table. "She has already eaten. This was made specifically for Luke," and Luke realized this. His heart immediately started racing uncontrollably. Excited, he picked up his chopsticks and took a bite of the noodles, savoring the taste. It had been so long since he last ate a meal she prepared. Previously, he wouldn't let her cook, only occasionally indulging his cravings by allowing her to make something. Counting back, it had actually been a full year since he last tasted her cooking. Eating this bowl of noodles now, his heart swelled with excitement, thinking it was a sign of her softening. But little did he know, this was the last meal of a condemned man. After finishing this bowl of noodles, "Go back to City A. Staying here won't change anything." Ada uttered these words indifferently. Luke froze for a moment with the chopsticks in his hand. then continued shoveling noodles into his mouth as if he hadn't heard anything. Seeing him like this, Ada frowned and was about to speak again when Luke urgently cut her off. The noodles taste the same as before, unchanged. Without waiting for her reply, he ate the last bite, then took the bowl and chopsticks to the kitchen to wash them. Whenever Ada showed the slightest sign of speaking, Luke would immediately say something nonsensical to cut her off. After finishing the dishes, he walked out the door without even glancing at Ada. I should go now. Thank you for making me noodles." After closing the door, Luke had only taken a few steps before he couldn't hold on any longer. He stopped to brace himself against the wall, struggling to keep from collapsing. He thought she was willing to accept his apology, but she dealt him such a heavy blow. She directly told him it was impossible. So like a coward, he repeatedly interrupted her words, asking him to leave. In the following days, he didn't obediently go back. He couldn't bring himself to let go just like that. Ada completely ignored him too, and in recent days, his presence had been entirely absent. She even thought he had already gone back, and she didn't care where he went, as long as he stopped bothering her. But before she could even sigh in relief, Luke appeared again, and this time, everyone knew about it. It was Valentine's Day, and the guest house was bustling with people. And Luke showed up right at that moment, holding a huge bouquet of flowers in his arms, standing outside the shop with a beaming smile as he looked at her. At that moment, exclamations of surprise came from inside and outside the shop, and soon everyone inside had stepped out to look at the sky. "Oh my God. Who is this, Ada? This is just too romantic." Ada was puzzled by these words until she went outside and saw the drones in the sky. Then she understood. The drones performed in the sky, changing formations every few dozen seconds, with every display spelling out words of confession. She knew it must have been Lucas doing. He was the only one here who knew her Asoda. When she turned to look at Luke, she was met with his deeply affectionate gaze. She wasn't moved by what he had done, Ada, because these were all things Luke had done for her before. Though it was the same person, so much had already changed. The night breeze brushed against her cheeks, lifting her long hair. Luke held flowers in his arms, locking eyes with her as he stepped closer to her one step at a time. For a moment, it felt like he had returned to his university days when he was pursuing Ada. Back then, he had also nervously held flowers, walking step by step toward the one he loved. Only, the excitement then was the tension of anticipation, whereas now it was the tension of impending loss. In just a few steps, he approached and stopped, extending the bouquet with a gentle tone. "Happy Valentine's Day, Ada." Ada didn't glance at the flowers but kept her gaze fixed on him. Then he watched as she took out her phone, tapped a few times, and held it to her ear before lifting her eyes to stare directly at him and speak. "Hello, there are drones flying illegally by the beach on Minley Street. Please clean them up." Every word of these sentences reached his ears clearly. His hand froze in midair. Those eyes were still fixed on him, but all he felt was a bone-chilling cold. In less than 5 minutes, the drones by the shore fell one after another, crashing into the sea and disappearing without a trace. What's going on? Why did they all fall down? They were clearly so far away, he shouldn't have been able to hear anything. Yet he kept feeling as if the sound of drones crashing into the sea was ringing in his ears. It was as if they were crashing straight into his heart, leaving him breathless. Suddenly, he felt a lightness in his hand. Ada had taken the flowers from him. Luke stared at her blankly, unable to comprehend the meaning behind her series of actions. For the first time, he found her so inscrutable. He couldn't see through her, as if he had never truly understood her at all. Ada took the flowers and lowered her head to inhale their scent lightly. The fragrance remained as sweet and overwhelming as in her memories. Yet it could no longer evoke the same feelings from the past. Only memories remain beautiful, and one should never dwell in the past. She let out a light laugh and, under Luke's somewhat puzzled gaze, tossed the flowers into the nearby trash bin. With a thud, it struck Luke's heart, leaving his face pale. She raised her head to meet his eyes and said calmly, "Luke, don't waste your effort." Hearing her rejection once again, Luke did not feel the expected heart-wrenching pain. Because it seemed he had grown accustomed to the pain. Every minute and every second after she left, his heart ached. He had become numb, and the smile on his face turned bitter. Ada, are you still unwilling to forgive me? What must I do for you to give me another chance? I deeply regret the decisions I made before. The 6 months after you left were a living hell for me. I can't lose you again." Ada showed no change in her facial expression. No matter how much he regretted or suffered after she left, it couldn't alter what had already happened. "It's no use, Luke, there's no possibility for us anymore." These words instantly drained Luke's strength, leaving his eyes filled with helplessness and confusion. This kind of Ada made him feel unfamiliar, unsure how to respond, so he could only let her turn and walk away from his sight, powerless to do anything. In truth, that sentence was already Ada pronouncing a death sentence on Luke. A smart person would know not to persist, but Luke was clearly not that smart person. He still hadn't given up. Before, he had just silently watched over her from the sidelines. Now, he began pursuing her openly. He bought her breakfast, sent her flowers, helped her move things, ordinary gestures, yet ones that Ada couldn't ignore. Every time Ada threw the flowers in the trash right in front of him, he would only feel down for a moment before acting as if nothing had happened. Only he knew that the fortress in his heart was crumbling piece by piece, unsure when it would collapse entirely, and only Ada could save him. He dared not ask for her answer, knowing how difficult it would be to hear the one he desired, so he could only foolishly chase after her. That day, he followed her to the seaside, where she usually walked without stopping, but today, she stopped halfway. Luke also halted a few steps away in the park, waiting for a while, but Ada showed no intention of moving. Only then did he belatedly realize she was waiting for him. Though he told himself not to expect anything, he couldn't help but feel a secret joy in his heart. He approached with hurried steps, speaking nervously. "Ada." Ada continued gazing at the sea without turning around. She spoke softly. "Do you remember, we said we'd come see the sea together?" Hearing this, Luke paused in surprise. His thoughts couldn't help but drift back to the past. When they had just gotten together during their university days, when he learned that she loved watching the sea, he said, "Let's go to the beach for our graduation trip." Ada also agreed with a smile. But later, after graduation, his desire to marry Ada was discovered by his parents. It caused quite a stir, and the promise was left unfulfilled. When everything was finally settled, he said they would go to the seaside for the New Year's Eve in 2024. But what was he doing then? He had completely forgotten this promise, preoccupied only with thoughts of his arranged marriage partner. At this thought, Luke felt a sharp pain in his chest, as if a knife were twisting in his heart, leaving him breathless. Enduring the pain in his heart, he stared fixedly at her profile, unconsciously raising a hand as if to grasp something, but he only grasped at the empty air. Then Ada turned to look at him, unfazed by his odd gesture. There seemed to be something familiar in her eyes. But upon closer inspection, it was gone. "Luke, you've been here for over half a month. What exactly are you trying to do? Half a month already. Yet it feels like only half a month." Luke thought to himself. Just half a month had passed, yet it felt like an eternity to him. He let out a bitter laugh, his voice hoarse as he said, "Ada, during the time you were gone, I thought a lot. I thought about the suffering you endured, and then about the foolish things I did. In the end, all that remained in my mind were the beautiful memories we once shared. The conclusion I reached is that I can't let you go. I've truly come to deeply realize my mistakes, and I've also deeply realized that I truly can't live without you. So, Ada, I beg you, please give me a chance to make it up to you, okay? I will definitely make it up to you properly, and we'll go back to how we were before, okay? Ada, I'm begging you." Opportunity. Ada let out a sarcastic chuckle. "You were already given your chance, but you didn't cherish it. Back when you were pursuing me, you also said to give you an opportunity to treat me well. I gave it to you, and what was the result? I was left covered in wounds. Now you're asking for another chance. I'm telling you there isn't one. No more opportunities." She is not one to dwell on the past. Since this opportunity has been voided, she won't offer it again. Luke was instantly crushed by these words, his back bending as if under a heavy weight, his throat so choked that he couldn't utter a single word. The pain in his heart was like a knife cutting through him, making every breath an agony. Ada finally dropped the line, "This is where we end." With that, she turned and walked away. Luke stood as if nailed to the spot, watching her gradually disappear into the distance. When her figure was completely out of sight, he felt his vision engulfed by darkness, not a glimmer of light remaining. He had no idea how long he had been standing there, perhaps minutes, or maybe hours. Only then did sensation finally return to his limbs. Luke wasn't sure if this counted as a final ultimatum, but he still refused to give up just like that. But he could clearly feel Ada's resistance toward him. It was as if two little voices were arguing in his heart. One urged him not to give up and keep pursuing her, while the other told him to listen to Ada and let things be. They fought relentlessly. And Luke remained at a loss for what to do. He couldn't imagine how gloomy the mornings would be without seeing Ada after waking up. This inner turmoil completely collapsed one morning. By that day, he hadn't seen Ada at the shop for 2 days. At first, he thought they just hadn't crossed paths because she was busy. But by the second day he finally realized something was wrong. Early in the morning, he rushed to the front desk in a panic, his tone urgent. "Where's your boss?" The receptionist knew he was pursuing her boss, but was still startled by his appearance and remained silent for a long while. Luke asked again before she finally spoke. The boss said she had something to attend to and would be away for a few days. "Where did she go?" "I don't know, the boss didn't say." Luke returned to his room in a daze, sitting on the bed with hollow eyes staring blankly into the void. Gone. She's gone again. She's left him behind once more. The fortress in his heart collapsed with a crash, and he felt himself sinking into boundless darkness. He had no idea how much time had passed before he finally pulled out his phone and called his assistant. Ever since Luke left City A, the assistant hadn't received a call from him in a long time. This time, when the call connected, a weak voice came through. "Find out where Ada went. I'll send you the new identity details." After saying that, Luke hung up the phone and sent over the new identity of Ada he had uncovered these days. Despite his assistant's full of doubts, he quickly found the flight information. Luke threw all his previous hesitation out of his mind the moment he received it. His mind was completely occupied with finding Ada and not letting her escape again. But actually, Ada just went out to meet friends and had no intention of running away. In fact, her friends had been asking her to come over for a while, but she was busy during the peak travel season. Now that things have slowed down, she went straight there. Luke was no longer connected to her, so naturally, she didn't feel the need to inform him. This is why the sensitive Luke thought she was trying to run away again. When she saw Luke at the hotel entrance, Ada frowned slightly in irritation. She thought to herself, "He's really like a haunting ghost." Luke noticed there was someone else with her and realized she might just be here for fun, not trying to escape. He immediately felt relieved, seeing there were others around. He also restrained himself from acting rashly and simply followed quietly behind her. When only Ada was left alone, Luke could no longer restrain himself and quickly strode up to her. In those few steps, his eyes were already reddened. He tightly grasped her shoulders, his voice trembling with an unnoticed panic. "I thought you'd run away again. I thought you'd abandoned me once more. Thank goodness. Thank goodness." By the end, his voice gradually trailed off. What exactly was he thanking goodness for? Ada just didn't run away. It doesn't mean she forgave him. Despair flooded his heart, tears welled up in his eyes. But he still kept his head down, unwilling to let her see his vulnerability, yet the words that came out were choked with sobs. "Ada, I really can't live without you. Please don't leave me. I beg you." He could no longer think of any other way to make her stay, so in desperation, he resorted to this method, hoping it would soften her heart. But he truly didn't understand Ada. She would never soften her heart toward someone who had hurt her. Luke kept pleading, I'm sorry, Ada. Don't leave me, don't go." Actually, Ada was seeing him cry for the first time, and she was only briefly surprised before returning to her usual self. There's no reason in the world to forgive just because someone sheds a few tears. She mustered her strength and broke free from his grasp. "I've made it very clear that day. There's no possibility for us anymore. Don't let our past beautiful memories be completely exhausted." Luke staggered back 2 steps, his heart feeling as if it were being sliced by 1,000 knives. Finally, he remembered the ring around his neck and hurriedly took it off, trembling as he held it out to her. Desperately grasping at this lifeline, his words came out in a jumbled rush. Ada, do you remember this ring? You promised we'd stay together forever. You can't break that promise now. Let's get married as soon as we go back, okay? Ada let out a sarcastic chuckle, as she too recalled the past, which only made it feel more ironic. Her promise was built upon Luke's promise. If Luke didn't even keep his word properly, why should she? Don't you find it ridiculous when you say that yourself? Let's just leave each other alone, okay? Don't make me look back on this relationship with nothing but pain. Luke said nothing more, only silent tears continued to fall. After that day, Ada stayed there for a week, and she could always see Luke's figure around. He had no intention of speaking to her, just staring blankly in her direction. Ada stopped paying attention to him, knowing he was lost in thought. He would leave once he figured things out. Luke had indeed decided to leave. He was awakened by Ada's words. She said she didn't want to recall only pain. He finally stopped deceiving himself into thinking she would return. It took him 7 months to accept her departure. Then, he spent half a month forcing himself to leave. On a very ordinary day, he boarded the plane back to his home country. Ada's departure was earth-shattering. While his was silent and unnoticed, as soon as he returned, he shut himself in his home, refusing to see anyone. It seemed like he had returned to the state when Ada had just left. Only back then there was still hope in his heart that she would return. But now only despair remained. The curtains have never been opened, and every day he lives in such darkness that he can't even remember the date anymore. The only things keeping him going now are the photos on his phone and that necklace. He had no idea how much time had passed when a knock came at the door. Luke showed no intention of opening the door. Still lying motionless on the carpet, it wasn't until the voice of Hayes' father came from outside that he dragged his weak steps to open the door. As soon as he opened the door, he was greeted with a slap, which he couldn't dodge and took squarely. He froze for a moment, then raised his hand to cover the side of his face and laughed. "Dad, what are you doing?" Hayes Sr. grew even more irritated seeing him in such a listless state. Over a month ago, Luke abandoned important clients to go find Ada, which had already made him quite angry. But I thought he would give up once he hit a wall. Unexpectedly, he came back physically, but his soul stayed behind. I had no choice but to come to his door. "What are you doing now? Look at what you've become for a woman, not going to work, not leaving the house. What do you think you're doing?" Hayes's father's angry words echoed through the villa. Luke merely smiled indifferently without saying a word. This attitude immediately made Hayes's father flush red with anger, his neck bulging. It took him quite a while to calm his breathing. "The way you are now, Ada would only dislike you even more if she saw you." At these words, Luke reacted, and Hayes's father noticed, continuing, "Seeing you like this, she'll only regret ever loving you." Seeing Luke frozen as if genuinely contemplating, Hayes Sr. softened his tone. "Luke, the responsibilities on your shoulders extend beyond love. There's also the Hayes family. You wouldn't want Ada to know you're someone who shirks responsibility, would you?" After saying this, he patted his son on the shoulder and left the room. Hopefully, he'll come to his senses. The door closed, and the villa was plunged into darkness again. Luke was left stunned by those 2 sentences. No one likes someone who lacks responsibility, so he couldn't afford to wallow in despair. He outright ignored Ada no longer loving him. The next day, he returned to work at the company, once again using his job to ease his longing for Ada. At this moment, Gia was right downstairs of his company. After the apology session, she had been scolded by her father and confined at home for over half a year. As soon as she got out, she heard that Luke was no longer in City A. Now that she finally had news of him again, she came straight here. Gia had been filled with hatred for him. There was love before, but ever since he heartlessly made her abort their child, her heart had been consumed by resentment. She would never forget the feeling when the child left her body. Although the anesthesia had numbed the physical pain, her heart was in unbearable agony. Clearly, the marriage alliance was agreed upon by both of them, and the child was conceived together. The deception Ada was also his doing. Why should she be the only one punished, while he, Luke, gets off scot-free? She wouldn't allow it. She absolutely wouldn't allow it. Gia had been sitting in the car downstairs since she saw Luke enter the building in the morning. all day long. Her gaze remained fixed on the building's entrance. At 10 p.m., Luke emerged from the building and headed to the parking lot to drive. In the car, Gia, the moment she saw him, her eyes locked onto him unwaveringly, and her hands tightened around the parking wheel. As soon as that car pulled out, she started her engine, slammed the accelerator, and crashed into it with full force. A deafening noise followed, leaving both vehicles completely wrecked. A witness quickly called for an ambulance after seeing the whole incident. After being rushed to the hospital, Gia only suffered a fracture and would recover after some rest. As for Luke, he wasn't so lucky. He was severely injured and remained unconscious in the hospital for over half a year before finally waking up. When he opened his eyes to the sterile white hospital room, his memories gradually came flooding back. His first thought was, why hadn't the accident killed him? Waking up only to face a world without Ada. He might as well have died, but perhaps heaven intended for him to stay awake and atone, not allowing him to die so easily. Hayes's mother, seeing him open his eyes, immediately burst into tears and called for the doctor. After the examination, there were no major issues, just a slight limp when he first started walking. As long as he focuses on recovery during the rehabilitation period, there won't be any lasting effects. Hearing that he might be disabled for life, his expression remained unchanged. He didn't ask who had hit him, but rather Hayes' mother spoke first, saying it was Gia who hit him out of hatred for him making her abort their child, and that Hayes' father had already pulled strings to get her sentenced to life imprisonment. After hearing this, Luke wasn't surprised either. He deserved the hatred, having done so many terrible things, and this was just retribution. In the following days, he remained in the hospital for rehabilitation training. Suddenly, one day, he checked the date and realized tomorrow was Ada's birthday. He immediately called his assistant and asked him to book a flight to U-Town. The assistant knew right away that he was going to find Ada and immediately advised, "Hayes, your leg isn't ready for travel yet. Wait until it's healed before you go." Luke wouldn't listen. "Tomorrow is her birthday. I promised I'd always be there to celebrate with her. I can't break my promise again. If you won't book it, I'll do it myself. I'm going no matter what." The assistant knew they couldn't persuade him otherwise, so they had to agree. In the end, Luke added one more instruction. "Don't tell my parents." Early the next morning, Luke dragged his sick body onto a plane to U-Town, with the assistant following along out of concern. After getting off the plane, he went straight to a bakery to buy a cake, even though the assistant had offered to do it for him. But Luke insisted on buying it himself. By the time everything was settled, it was already afternoon. Luke carried the cake and nervously went to the guest house, but didn't see anyone there. He asked the front desk, and the receptionist was startled when she saw him appear. Luke asked again, and only then did she speak up. "The boss went to the beach." Before she could finish, Luke quickly walked towards the beach with the cake. Only upon closer inspection did the receptionist notice he had a slight limp. Luke walked to the beach and told his assistant to wait outside without following him. Then he stepped onto the beach, and at a glance, he spotted the figure sitting on the sand. He tried his best to maintain a normal pace as he walked over, then gritted his teeth against the pain in his left leg as he crouched down in front of her. Ada was surprised to see him, but even more puzzled. The next second, Luke dispelled all her doubts. He held the exquisite cake in his hand and brought it before her, saying softly, "Ada, happy birthday. I promised to celebrate your birthday with you every year." Hearing this, Ada was momentarily stunned. Luke had already unwrapped the cake and lit the candles. He clumsily sang the birthday song, then asked her to make a wish. Under his urging gaze, Ada finally closed her eyes. Meanwhile, Luke watched her greedily from across, not missing a single opportunity, because each glance would mean one less remaining. Though Ada had closed her eyes, she wasn't actually making a wish. Wishes are just ethereal things, mere comforts that won't come true. She only needs to live well in the present. Without needing these things, after waiting a few seconds, she opened her eyes and met Luke's burning gaze, but she remained indifferent. Even when Luke was about to cut the cake for her, Ada spoke up. "No need, I've already eaten today." Upon entering, he accurately located Ada without hesitation, then opened his arms to embrace her, cooing playfully, "Darling, why didn't you come to meet me?" I've been waiting for you. You smell so nice." He knew it was time to leave now, because if he didn't go, Ada would eventually drive him away. At this thought, he lowered his head and let out a bitter laugh, saying hoarsely, "Happy birthday. May you have peace and smooth sailing in the future." Then he stood up, controlling his steps as he turned to leave. Suddenly, Ada's voice came from behind, saying, "Let this promise end this year." Luke's body stiffened, and that stubborn tear still fell despite himself. He didn't turn back, replying hoarsely with a "okay," then hesitantly added, "Now, when I look back, is there only pain?" He stood frozen, his hands clenched as he waited for her response. Seconds or minutes, he couldn't tell. Ada spoke. "No, there was beauty too." Luke was stunned for a moment, a smile tugged at the corner of his lips as tears fell uncontrollably. He responded with a muffled and continued walking forward. This one sentence was enough. This sentence would sustain him for a lifetime. After returning, the doctor examined his leg and regretfully said it would never fully recover. Luke heard this without regret. He doesn't regret going to find Ada, even if it left him permanently disabled. He still wouldn't regret it. Luke no longer appeared before her, only occasionally sneaking a glance at her from afar. He didn't know when this maddening longing would fade. Perhaps it wouldn't stop until death. Thank you for watching today's story. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, so feel free to share your opinions, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more great stories. We'll see you in the next video.